Would not recommend doing this. Just fly. Just channel your inner Taylor Swift energy and just fly. Okay, in retrospect, that was a little bit dramatic. I'm Robert, this is Linnea Nelson Vlogs, and I've sat on this footage for about a year, and in retrospect, I would 100% recommend taking the trip from Morocco to Spain across the Gibraltar if you're interested in being sustainable, or if you're interested in an extremely memorable, extremely classic way to get from Africa to Spain. However, I made about 10 mistakes going from Africa to Spain that cost me hundreds and almost cost me thousands of dollars, and I don't want you to make the same 10 mistakes that I did. So in this video that is one part vlog, one part informational video, I'm going to break down those errors so that you won't make the same mistakes. Today I am in Fez, and I am about to embark on one of the travel journeys I am most interested in, which is crossing the Gibraltar into Spain. The one travel story my mom and grandparents have about traveling abroad was when my grandfather was a nuclear submarine technician for the Navy and was stationed in southern Spain. My mother's grandfather, who was a French-Canadian, a Quebecois, came to visit them, and they decided to go to Morocco so he could, experience some French culture since it's just across the Gibraltar from Spain. And they had a lot of memories of crossing the Gibraltar and visiting Tangier. And today I'm heading from Fez to Tangier, and then I'm going to go from Tangier to Tarifa up to Córdoba. Basically, I'm just going to be crossing the Gibraltar. Now, I thought I could do it all in one day. However, the earliest trains, unless I want to get up at 4 or 5 in the morning, which is tricky because it's very hard to catch cabs here because the Medina closes, I'm actually heading out today so I can catch the train to Tangier, spend some time in Tangier, and then safely get the ferry tomorrow, so there's less of a chance I'll miss my buses that I need to get at the very end of the day to get to Córdoba on time. So I'm very excited to start this journey, to share in a journey that, my mother and grandparents had before, and to just kind of experience this, to experience that kind of primal feeling of crossing the Gibraltar, going back to the Moorish conquest of Spain in 700. This just feels like such a historically important route, and I'm really excited to be on it. Anyways, let's get going. And off we go on the way to Tangier. Very exciting day ahead of us. Very excited to start the next leg of our journey to Spain. So I made it to Fez station, and I just made a terrifying realization, which is, had I gone tomorrow morning, I would have had a snowball's chance in hell of making it to the ferry in time, because when you look online on websites like Rome to Rio, which give you multiple routes to get here because Google Maps doesn't really work well in Morocco, there is this recommendation to take a train to Kenitra and then get on the high-speed train to Tangier, which seems like the better option because it's shorter because of the high-speed second leg. However, when I got here, I found out that they won't sell you a ticket from Kenitra to Tangier at the Fez station. You have to buy that in Kenitra, which is a problem because there's a 20-minute connection time, and then if you miss that, you're out of luck for another hour or two until the next train comes. So this creates a problem where I very easily could have missed my ferry, which means I would have missed my bus, which means I would have missed my train to Córdoba and probably lost my hotel reservation. So just be aware that if you're leaving from Fez, the best option is just to pick the train time that gives you a direct trip to Tangier rather than trying to do the Kenitra transfer. I think it also might be cheaper just to take the direct train because I think the high-speed train also costs more. Once again, glad I left a day early to Tangier, otherwise I would have been probably screwed getting to Córdoba. While I was a little sad to leave Fez a day early, I felt confident that my decision to allot extra time to cross the Gibraltar was the right choice. Additionally, I was starting to burn out on the hustle and bustle of the Medinas after 3 or 4 days of them between Fez and Marrakesh at this point, so I was excited to experience a more modern Moroccan city. However, the red flags on the beach should have foreshadowed what was to come. Show my grandfather this video footage because 50 years ago he said there was nothing here, but it's just so massively built up over time. You can't even see how much stuff is out there because of the distance and the focal length. But this is as built up as Waikiki Beach in Honolulu. This is incredible. Also, I don't think I've ever seen that shade of blue on ocean water before. It's the most teal, azul blue color you could ask for on the Mediterranean. This is incredible. I will say that I'm very skeptical to go on this beach, given that everyone I see there is either wearing tennis shoes, riding a horse, or a wild dog. This does not seem like the ideal beach to go barefoot on. While I was filming on the beach, a man named Ashraf saw my vlogging setup and asked if I could take a portrait of his family. I told him it would be a week or two before I could edit it and send it back to him since I was traveling without my laptop, but he said it was fine. Weeks later, I got it back to him, and he was so thankful that he promised me that I could stay with him for free if I ever returned to Tangier. The main beach of Tangier was much prettier when the visibility was better the following morning. However, the wind was incredible. I was nearly blown over multiple times despite weighing roughly 215 pounds. I muted the audio because it sounded like those clips that the rover filmed on Mars. Because of this, I very quickly found out that all ferries directly across the strait from the city of Tangier to Tarifa were going to be cancelled for the day. This is the basis for my next 2 tips. First, don't pre-buy tickets if you aren't taking a vehicle across. You have to redeem paper tickets to the ferry terminal anyways, and there is almost always available space for pedestrians since the ships are huge. This will give you incredible flexibility in regards to when and where you catch the boat. Second, there is a second ferry terminal called Tangier Med Algeciras that is about an hour east of Tangier Ville that is more protected from the harsh currents of the Strait of Gibraltar. On particularly bad weather days, you should consider changing your travel plans to using this port since the passage is generally more reliable. So, day 2 of my trip from Morocco to Spain has gone wildly out of plan, so I'm definitely glad that I left Fez early because I now have to go to Tangier Med to catch a ferry to Algeciras instead of Tangier Ville in downtown Tangier. This is a fairly big deal for a variety of reasons. One, Tangier Med is about an hour away from Tangier Ville, so had I tried to take the train from Fez, there was no way I would make this. Second, this ferry is later, so I am now leaving at 2 p.m. instead of noon from Tangier Ville. So the ferry ride is maybe half an hour longer from Tangier Med to Algeciras, and it's later in the day. However, there is a later bus leaving from Algeciras that will get me to Malaga on time to catch my train to Córdoba. Now, this might sound expensive, but the thing that happened is that they refunded the ferry company, which I called via my cell phone number. I probably should have used WhatsApp. I don't know if that's going to cost a lot because it was a Wi-Fi call, even though it was with my base cell phone. Probably should have done this as a WhatsApp call. Worst case scenario, that's probably $3 a minute for 10 minutes, or maybe 5 minutes. So I called the ferry company. The ferry company refunded me and gave me instructions. So I'm going to go to Tangier Med. Then I booked my bus ticket through BusBud, and as long as you cancel your bus ride at least 2 hours before it leaves, you can get somewhere between, I want to say a 70 to a 90% refund. So I refunded my bus ride from Tarifa to Malaga, and now I'm going to be on a shorter bus ride from Algeciras to Malaga. So anyways, I'm about to check out of my hotel. My travel plans have massively changed. I'm going to find somewhere to eat brunch, and then I'm going to find a way to get to Tangier Med. I've already rebooked everything. I've checked into my ferry. This should all still work. I'm going to make it to Córdoba on time. I have faith in myself. And I guess the reasoning is because there's significant rain and thunderstorms coming, the Strait of Gibraltar, which already has rougher water than the regular Mediterranean Sea because it's where the Mediterranean Sea intersects the Atlantic Ocean, has become impassable for today. Okay, let's get into it. The next issue I encountered was from getting from Tangier Ville to Tangier Med, which is about an hour by taxi and 2 hours by bus. I intended to leave via bus I3 near the Tangier Ville railway station. Since this is the recommended route to go, it only costs about $3 if you can find the bus. And the problem very rapidly becomes, though, there is not reliable Google Maps information on where this bus is. There's just a random bus stop logo in the middle of a 4-way highway at a random underpass below a roundabout. And it's highly trafficked, cars are flying by, there's no clear bus stop, it's just arrived somewhere here. And if you miss it, you're out of luck because this bus only runs every hour to couple of hours, and you have no other options. It's so bad that there's actually an article called Bus I3 from Tangier to Tangier Med actually exists. And if you miss this bus, the vastly more convenient but extremely more expensive option is to take a taxi for anywhere between $30 and $50, depending on how well you negotiate, in contrast to the $1 to $3 bus ride to get to the port. I made it on. That was really stressful because everything's gone wrong so far, so it's good to finally be on the boat. I'll talk about it more when I get off. But yeah, wow. This is crazy. So, this has been a veritable nightmare of a travel day. I finally got on the boat. I don't know if I'm actually allowed to be in this part of the boat because it seems nicer than the ticket I paid for, but it also seems kind of like a public cafeteria shopping area for duty-free shopping, so I think I'm fine here. Also, I might need to pick up one of these specials because I've not really eaten anything besides like energy drinks that seem like knockoff Red Bull and a couple pieces of candy today, because when I realized that, so things got crazy back at Tangier, and I got here around noonish for a 2 p.m. ferry. It said it would depart at 2, so I kind of figured we would be loaded by 2 and like heading out of port, but it turns out when they say it departs at 2, it means you board the bus to the boat at 2. So I definitely would not have made my bus. So, now I set up a bus ticket for 4:15, thinking we were leaving exactly at 2 p.m. and traveling about 70 to 90 minutes, expecting to arrive around 3:30 in Algeciras. Now, there is a catch. Morocco doesn't do daylight savings time, and this is something that's really confused me when I've called people back in the States, because I was like, oh, we should be 5 hours ahead right now because we're in like UK time. Well, it turns out we're only 4 hours ahead. And it turns out that Morocco doesn't do daylight savings time, but they do Ramadan time. So to make it easier for people to fast, they push the clocks back an hour. So Spain's actually ahead of us. So arriving at 3:30 Morocco time is actually arriving at 4:30 Spanish time. So I missed my first bus that I paid $20 to get on. So I had to find a second bus that leaves an hour later than that, which will get me to the train station with about 30 minutes to spare before my train leaves to Córdoba. So this has been absolutely crazy. I'm just happy to be on the boat, happy to be able to kick back and relax for a while. The food actually smells really good, so I'm probably going to try to eat something, which I think the rest of the day is going to be a mad dash to get everywhere we need to be. I was talking with Linnea when I boarded because there's decent Wi-Fi on the boat, and she's very happy she didn't come on this because this is the kind of thing that freaks her out about traveling. So it's probably good that I'm doing this on my own and I'm improvising. This has probably added, just issues with the ferry have probably added an unnecessary $80 to our travel costs, or my travel costs, because I had to get a hotel. Because it turns out you should only do this if you intend to either spend a night in Tangier or spend a night in Tarifa, because the bus system doesn't seem to be optimized to facilitate people going from the edge of Morocco on the ferries to the edge of Spain and then into the interior. There's only a handful of buses that run every day, which has a whole nother conversation to have about sustainable travel, in the sense of it might actually be cheaper and substantially faster to catch a plane from Casablanca or Rabat to Sevilla than it is to try to actually take what would be the more sustainable route. So that's something that's kind of blown me away. And honestly, the train prices in Spain are absurd. For $70 train rides for 2-hour trains, it's insane. But anyways, I'm excited to finally get there. I'm excited to finally be in a country that I at least can vaguely speak the language in. Also, at some point on this trip, I need to find passport control on the boat so I can be ready to cross over into Spain when the time comes. I can just get off the boat. This is a crazy experience. This is probably the most challenging travel day with the most travel plan changes I've ever done in my life. This involved trains, boats. I feel more accomplished now, just as a person, because I've done this. Anyways, I'll let you know what happens when we finally touch down in Spain. I'm definitely going to be happy to be in Europe. At this point, my ferry has left an hour late, and I'm not going to be able to clear immigration with enough time to get to the bus station in order to catch my bus to catch my train to Córdoba, meaning I'm probably going to forfeit at least one night's worth of hotel. I think I found a fourth alternate bus that will get me to Sevilla, which means I'm going to miss my trains to Granada, and I'm going to have to reschedule that trip. I probably lost $500 trying to take the ferry to be sustainable and to see this crossing, because it is so unreliable. I would not recommend doing this. Just fly. Just channel your inner Taylor Swift energy and just fly across Gibraltar. At this point, I'm glad that in my state of panic that I still had the foresight to call my hotel and tell them in broken Spanish that I could not get across the Gibraltar in time, and to beg them to not cancel my 4 prepaid nights of hotel that had totaled about $500. I was also kicking myself for not booking those nights flexibly or using a credit card with trip delay or trip cancellation insurance. However, even though they were under no legal obligation to do so, they still honored my reservation, massively mitigating the financial damage this could have caused. With nothing left to do but watch the Rock of Gibraltar rise above the horizon, I went outside to call my grandfather to hear the story that set me off on this ridiculous journey again, since I was not concerned with the cost of making an international phone call, since I felt that I was already hemorrhaging money. Admittedly, the views of Gibraltar were stunning, and there was something incredible about the sheer scale of the port and the sheer volume of trade moving through it. I could barely find my way off the ferry and through the terminal when we finally landed. Landing at the terminal was surprisingly anxiety-inducing. Since the port is largely designed for vehicles and shipping, they don't get many pedestrians. There were no staff attendants or signs directing anyone on where to go, and I was the only person walking off the ferry at this time of day. It took me like 15 minutes to even find the passport gates while I was frantically counting down the minutes until the next bus to Sevilla left. When I got to the gate, there was absolutely no one there. I was seemingly stuck in no man's land for minutes until a border agent realized that there was actually someone trying to enter the country on foot through the port. I then nearly walked through security without passing customs since there was no one manning the scanner until someone yelled at me from an office down a hallway. Outside the terminal, everything felt remarkably like Tangier. I noticed that the sign had a funny motto that translates to something like, "A way to do Europe," which makes me wonder if a whole town can have self-esteem issues. But I didn't have time to stop and think about it because I had to sprint to the bus station. While Algeciras is the most southern point in the Spanish rail system, the trains are so infrequent that most connections to the other hub cities are by bus. With my dying phone, I bought a final bus ticket for a 3-hour ride to Sevilla for about $30 at 7 p.m. Central European time, and the only mid-range hotel room I could find for about $125 in Sevilla. My phone died and there wasn't enough light to film. If I could not have found a bus, in the worst-case scenario, hotels are only marginally more expensive in Tarifa and Algeciras than in Tangier, so you can always just spend the night there for $60 to $80 if you miss the last bus. However, something magical happened in Sevilla. 2024 was a particularly bad year for the Semana Santa due to the same severe wind and rains that stopped me from crossing the Gibraltar. Many of the world-famous parades and processions have been cancelled. When I arrived in my hotel, the receptionist told me to immediately drop my bags and run out to see the procession through the park. This was the first of only 2 processions that I saw the entire week I was in Spain. Now let's do a cost breakdown of a typical flight versus a typical ferry across the Gibraltar before returning to the total of how much my mistakes personally cost me on my trip. Okay, so your most convenient and possibly cheapest option is to take a direct flight or a one-stop connection flight from Fez or Marrakesh to the Andalusia region's transit hubs of Sevilla or Malaga on a budget airline. These assume one traveler on a budget airline with one carry-on. The flight prices are about a month out in 2025 prices, so these are inflated relative to when I took this trip. The airlines that you're most likely to be working with are going to be TAP, Pegasus, Ryanair, RAM, Royal Maroc, or Iberia, or Vueling. When we look at like Fez to Sevilla on like a Friday, Saturday night, it's about $100 on TAP. There's a 9-hour layover in Lisbon, which is long. You need to factor in the fact that you're probably going to have to eat an overinflated airport meal. That's going to add non-trivial like food costs to your like flight. If we look at Fez to Malaga, you do get the benefit of a Ryanair flight that is even cheaper for like $70. Ryanair does charge insane amounts of money if you somehow don't manage to meet their carry-on baggage requirements. You get $70 flights, and if you can't get on the Ryanair flight, your flight prices start spiking up to like $200 for a more traditional airline. You see comparable flight prices in like Marrakesh on Ryanair, around $90, but if there is not a Ryanair flight available, your flight prices start spiking to the $400 to $500 range, and on other airlines is in the $300 range. In this case, it's a 33-hour stopover in Lisbon, so I think that's one of those stays where you just hop off and do a day stop in Lisbon. Now, let's say you want to get further into the Andalusia region to like Córdoba or Granada. If you're in Sevilla, it typically takes between $10 and $60 by train to get to Córdoba. Obviously, buses are cheaper, but they're harder to navigate. The average price is on the ballpark of $30. If you're in Malaga, the average bus price is between $10 and $80, typically around $40. So as we said, it's between $90 to $100 to get from Fez or Marrakesh to either Sevilla or Malaga, and then it's another $30 to $40. So base price on that is going to be roughly, let's say $120 to $130. But since you're going to be traveling sometimes at weird times of night, you're going to have to like factor in a cab ride, or weird luggage fees, third-party booking fees, seat reservation fees, long layovers that are going to involve eating at airports. I think, if you factor in another $50 for that kind of stuff, you're probably going to be more like ballpark $180 to fly, and you're definitely going to sink at least an entire day into it. Okay, you guys, I'm not going to belabor this point too much longer. I'm not going to show a ton of maps at this point, because we've talked about this throughout the video. So I'm just going to do the cost breakdown and what it actually costs if you do semi-optimal travel with some reasonable bounds to take the ferry versus the flights. So it depends on where you start in kind of Morocco. If you start all the way south by the Sahara in Marrakesh, it's about $45 on the train. It's $30 from Fez, where I started. It is absolutely critical not to take Rail Ninja. Rail Ninja, like Ticketmaster, marks up ticket prices 30 to like 50%. So this website is called Bookaway. They work more closely with ONCF without the markup. So you can get second-class train tickets from Marrakesh, which is further south, for $45, or Fez for like $29. I think you can get prices closer to that at the station, even at the last minute. So with the ferries, you have a bunch of options. You can check those out on a website called Direct Ferries. There are a ton of providers. Direct Ferries will show you the rough crossing times. There's actually way more variability in the bounds than I realized. Even when it's not affected by Ramadan time, you'll notice these ranges are not, even if they say 1 hour, they're actually much larger ranges. These are not as tight as a flight. I didn't realize that. I should have taken that into account. You can see the price variability. You can see if there's an alternate route. So next, you're going to need to either figure out if you're going to stay overnight in Tangier on the Moroccan side or in Tarifa and Algeciras on the Spanish side. If you're going to stay in Tarifa and Algeciras, you're going to want to cross in the afternoon from Tangier. If you're going to stay in Tangier, you're going to want to cross first thing in the morning to Tarifa and Algeciras the next day. So your options for this are all in the $50 to $80 range. You know, there's some nice stuff. Like I stayed at Ibis Tangier City Center. It was like $60. You can go from very, very nice, like public kind of house, riad type stuff, up to like luxury hotels, all kind of in the range of like $40 to $80 in like Tangier. And you see similar things on, well, maybe business class hotels on the European side. Once you get to Tarifa or Algeciras, the bus from Tarifa to Sevilla is about $25. There's also technically a Malaga bus that runs through Algeciras. Or alternatively, from Algeciras, you can go to Sevilla for $30 or Malaga for $30. From there, you can go to Córdoba. From Sevilla, it's $25 to $35 on the train. From Malaga, it's $35 to $45. And Algeciras theoretically has a train as the southernmost point of the Spanish train system, but it's basically non-existent. It runs weekly. It's about $60. But if you add that, if you sum the cost of the bus and the trains, it comes out to about the same cost as the Algeciras direct train ticket. It doesn't make sense to take that. What does this add up to? If you take kind of the average of all these ranges, you find that the ferries are going to cost roughly $220 to $230, with the low end if you're optimal around $185, and a high end if you're suboptimal around $280, or if you opt for better accommodation. With the flights, if you get a budget airline and you don't go crazy with like airport food or baggage or taxi rides, you can probably keep it in the range of like $110 to $130, maybe $150. If you go super tight with it, or if you don't even need bags, you can definitely keep it sub $110, maybe even sub $100. Now, if you can't get a budget airline, be prepared to spend over $300. So it really ultimately comes down to whether or not you want the experience. I think for an extra $100, it's definitely worth it. It's more sustainable. You get to see more of the country. You can meet interesting people. I had a wonderful time seeing Tangier and Sevilla. It was nice meeting Ashraf and his family. And I definitely saw those processions that I wouldn't have seen otherwise. At this point, I'm now going to tabulate what I spent because of the errors I made with the buses, the extra ferry tickets, the extra night of hotel, and how much I theoretically could have lost had I not been able to convince the hotel receptionist to let me keep the booking. If you've watched to this point and you're invested in the story, please hang around. If not, please like and subscribe if this video was useful to you and you're interested in the rest of my travel content. If you have additional questions, feel free to comment and subscribe. And even if you don't have questions and just want to say that I'm an idiot for not planning this out better, feel free to comment that, because any engagement's good engagement. Anyways, back to the vlog. Welcome back to the vlog. It's me from 2 days in the future, and I just got to Córdoba. Things went seriously awry with the ferries, and thankfully I managed to mitigate some of the financial damage, but it could have cost me up to $1,000 had things gone worse. So I want to break down what happened. So the morning that we were supposed to depart, I received an email from S4S Ferry saying that the Strait of Gibraltar was too windy to cross, and they were canceling my ferry. Immediately, things started falling apart. I was able to get my bus reimbursed because I did it through a bus bud, so I didn't lose money on that bus. I talked with a customer service agent at FRS, and there's a bit of a language barrier. We were discussing, and she said there was a different ferry leaving from Tangier Mediterranean, which is an hour outside of Tangiers, at 2 p.m. in the afternoon. She asked if I wanted to cancel. get refunded or like change to that. So I said, I definitely want to change for that. And then she said, okay, I'm going to reimburse you. So I assume she canceled it. And in my panic, I bought a ticket. I thought I got reimbursed. I was only reimbursed for $5 because much later the ticket came through. But in my panic, I bought another ticket to Algeciras from that port. So I lost $40 on that. I tried to, at that point, find bus I3, which should have departed from the train station area to get there because it takes an hour to get there on the bus. It was now like 11 a.m. and I thought the buses ran more frequently because there was some websites saying they ran all the time. And then I looked at other websites that say they only run hourly, and it turns out they only ran hourly and it was already 11 a.m. And they said to get there 90 minutes early, which would be 12:30. So I ended up getting a taxi for about 300 dirham, which is on the low end, honestly, because it can go as high as 450 dirham, which is $45, depending on when you're going. And we actually managed to pass the bus on the way to Tangier Mediterranean. So I got there super early, expecting my boat to leave exactly 2 p.m. because they tell you to get there 90 minutes early. So I'm like, okay, get there 90 minutes early. This is going to leave at 2 sharp. So I book a bus going from Algeciras to Malaga to try to catch my train, leaving at 4:30 because I'm like, it's a 1 hour ferry ride. It's leaving at 2. My 2 p.m. Morocco time ferry was actually 3 p.m. Spanish time. So I missed that first bus. I bought it non-refundably, so there went another $25. So I then buy a different bus that was going to leave at 5:45, thinking, okay, we're going to leave at 3 p.m. Spanish time. We're going to get there, sometime around 4:30 Spanish time. Well, the boat subsequently did not actually leave the harbor until like 3:30, somewhere between 3 and 3:30 Morocco time, which is 4 to 4:30 Spanish time. And by the time it arrived, it was basically 6 p.m., so I missed my second bus. So at this point, I'm freaking out. And also, there was no one at the station. Stuff was shutting down. There was not even border patrol. I was starting to think I would have to illegally immigrate into the country because there was, no one working the, border. So I had to honestly wait until somebody came because there was no one there. So that was terrifying to be, in no man's land with no one to, let you through the border. So that was also very stressful. So once I get out, I scramble to get to the bus station because at this point, I know I'm going to miss the bus to Malaga. I'm not going to be able to get my train from Malaga to Córdoba. I just need to get as close to Córdoba as I can. I ended up finding a bus to Sevilla. I got to the bus station. I ran over there. It was about to leave. I was talking to the lady who was the last person at the station. She's like, I can't help you. We're closing down. I managed to buy the bus ticket for another $25 on my phone. It turns out you can just give the bus driver cash, and as long as it's not full, he'll just let you on the bus. So it turns out buying bus tickets in advance, unless you're going to some super crowded event, like Semana Santa between Córdoba and Sevilla, if you're in the outskirts of Spain, there's no reason to buy your bus tickets in advance. Just buy them on site. And I get to Sevilla. So at this point, to not be homeless, I book another $120 hotel room. So I have a place to stay in Sevilla. It was kind of nice because I got to see one of the processions before it got all rainy. It was my first Semana Santa procession. The one redeeming thing that saved me $500 is I had the foresight to call ahead and tell my hotel, hey, my ferry from Tangier got canceled. I can't get to Córdoba tonight. And I did this all in Spanish because the person I was talking to, the manager, only spoke Spanish. So I did this in a panic on the boat over. And I'm like, I can't make it. I prepaid. Is there any way I can keep the room even if I don't check in? I know this probably violates your check-in policy. And the guy's like, totally understandable. We'll make it work. And thankfully, the people at Hotel Selu have been fantastic. And they accommodated this, even though theoretically they were not contractually obligated to keep the room for me and could have just taken my money and re-rented the room out to somebody else. So thankfully that worked out. Now at this point, I'm in Sevilla. I sleep there for the night. I do a couple things in the morning. This was the day I was supposed to go to Granada, so I lost $25 on train tickets, trying to go to Granada. So I was in Sevilla, then I took a train to Córdoba. So I got here this afternoon. I'm chilling here. I still have my tickets in place to go back to Sevilla in the morning to have a longer day in Sevilla. So I'm going to spend the whole day in Sevilla tomorrow, and then I'm going to finish Good Friday off in Córdoba for a full day trip. I'm missing out on Granada. Now, had I lost the hotel room, I would have lost $1,000 trying to cross the Gibraltar to get here. So thankfully that worked out. Once again, this could have been $1,000 mistake. It only ended up being a couple $100 relative to the cost of a plane ticket. So So I'm fine with how this turned out. Don't make my mistakes. We'll be seeing Sevilla in the next video and then Cordoba for the final video in Andalusia. And Linnea wants to come to Spain, so we'll do Granada on our next trip. Thanks for watching.